Hey, how's everybody doing? Hope you're having a fantastic day. So today we are in our sixth video of the second section on the development of doctrine, and we're about to wrap it up. Next one's kind of the conclusion to the second section, and the whole section we've just been talking about virtuality. After the whole first section, we were talking about, okay, what does evolution mean? What are the different species of evolution? And this section is kind of the crux of the historical argument. And from here, we're going to be moving on to bringing forth different, how do I put it? Moving forth to bringing forth different conclusions, if you may, from what we've set out about virtuality and about the type of homogeneous evolution that we see in theology. So almost done. I feel like I've been repeating myself a lot in this second section. I feel like you kind of say the same thing under different aspects, with different arguments, with different historical points, and with different comparisons, different illustrations. So yeah, I will. Next video should be pretty short, and this video should be pretty short as well. But in this episode, what we're seeking to do here is we're seeking to finally get down to actually proving the thesis that the metaphysico-inclusive virtuality is objectively identical. The conclusion, the theological conclusion, which is presented when one has this presupposition of a metaphysico-inclusive virtuality, is something which is homogeneous. And you have this objective identity between the beginning and the end of a sort of development of doctrine, and it's also not, as some Thomists are going to say, merely explanatory. It's not merely explanatory. It's not an expository syllogism, which is just a sort of explanation of the terms. It's truly going from one concept to another concept, but it's staying within the same object. So we're showing that. We're showing that this is the one, and we've already kind of dealt with objections, explained the history behind it, and everything like that. We're going to say, okay, the physico-inclusive is wrong, and the metaphysico-inclusive is right. That's where we're at right now. So to begin, we need to set down some groundwork. So in order to have theological reasoning, at least according to us, so this will help us determine where the difference is at, we need four conditions. So the first condition, this is simple. The first premise, so the major premise, must be a truth of faith. The major premise must be a truth of faith. We're going from a truth of faith through a minor of reason to a theological conclusion. So the first, truth of faith. The second is that the other premise, so the minor premise, must be neither really nor merely nominally distinct. So there's that subjective distinction or virtual distinction that we mentioned. It's not real and it's not merely nominal, the distinction. The third is that we have metaphysical certitude, not doubtful, not probable, but metaphysical certitude of this minor premise. And then lastly, we obviously can't have incorrect reasoning. The reasoning must be tight. It can't be fallacious. So this is going to help us determine where sort of theology fits, because the third and the fourth conditions, so that it must have a not metaphysical certitude, must just have a certitude. So the third and the fourth, the fact that we have to have certitude in accordance with the science, so whether experimental science, like a psychological science, any science whatsoever, insofar as it is a science, must have certitude to its degree. And then also the fourth, that the reasoning can't be fallacious. It's proper to all sciences. So this is what's called the remote genus. So the remote genus of theology is determined by the fact that we have certitude of our premises and that the reasoning is not fallacious. That just makes a science a science. And the second so that the other premise is neither really nor merely nominally distinct, but has this virtual distinction. We're just bringing out the virtualities of the first premises. That gives what's called the proximate genus of theology. So this is proper to metaphysical sciences. And then the first one, so that it's a truth of faith, that gives the specific difference. So that's what distinguishes theology from all other sciences. That is that it works off of the articles of faith as its first principles, whereas other sciences work off of different articles for their first principles. Okay. So with these four conditions, so when it comes to the first condition, that is that it must be a truth of faith. This is something which is obviously true, because otherwise it would be a merely philosophical study, which theology is not merely philosophical. And the second condition, this is the condition, it's important, that the distinction between we can just kind of look, the distinction of the middle term, so that is the term that's both in the major and the minor premise, the distinction of the middle term from in the major premise from the subject, and in the minor premise from the predicate, that is a virtual distinction. Because if it's a real distinction, and you're moving to something which is really distinct, then that's a physical science. This is the Suarist opinion. But if it's merely something which is nominally distinct, then you aren't even moving on to a new notion. You're not moving on to a new idea, a new concept. Rather, there's no evolution at all, which is occurring. And that would make it a merely explanatory syllogism. So it's this second point that we kind of need to focus on. We're going to be focusing on the middle term. Okay, how does the middle term fit in? And therefore, how is the conclusion contained in the premises? And the third one is also obvious, that we have to have certitude about our premises. And then the fourth one is also obvious, that we can't have fallacious reasoning. So now with all of these in mind, I want to do a little bit of a thought experiment that's going to help us. It's going to help us figure out by a mock argument why theology in the second condition has this mere virtual distinction rather than a real distinction. Therefore, its proximate genus is a metaphysical science, not a physical science in its proximate genus. Okay, so this argument that I'm going to put forward, the major premise is that God is immutable. The minor premise is that whatever is immutable is eternal. And then the conclusion is that, therefore, God is eternal. God is immutable. Whatever is immutable is eternal. God is eternal. So let's pretend real quick for this thought experiment. This would be a fun one. Let's pretend that the entirety of Revelation, the entirety of formal revelation, the entirety of what's formally revealed in tradition and Scripture is these three words: God is immutable. God is immutable. In this case, let's kind of think through how, if that was all of Revelation, that God is immutable, how would we relate to the conclusion that therefore God is eternal? So we see in this reasoning, God is immutable. That's the major of faith, because as I said, that's all that's formally revealed on this supposition. And then whatever is immutable is eternal. That is our minor of reason. So our, in this case, immutable right here is our middle term connecting the major and the minor. And then God is eternal is our theological conclusion. So obviously, here all of the conditions are met. The first condition, as I said, we're supposing that it's something which is formally revealed. The second, eternality, is virtually contained in immutability. So that happens. The third is we have certitude that whatever is immutable is eternal. And the fourth, the reasoning process is correct. So we meet all the conditions. So now we have to ask ourselves real quick. In this case, under this supposition, in these circumstances, what is the value of the conclusion, of that theological conclusion? What is the value? What is the certainty? So the Scotists, they would say, well, it's already of faith. The modern Thomists, they would say that it can't be of faith. The Suarez would say that it could be of faith, but only by new revelation. Lugo would say it could be of faith, but only by transforming assistance. But the true opinion, and the one that Sola and the other Thomists take, is they say that before the definition of the church, so right now, it is, while in itself virtually contained in the faith, while in itself objectively identical to former revelation, while in itself it's something which is proximate to faith. It's not of faith in itself. Well, it's not of faith to us until there's the definition of the church. So right here, we are able to kind of synthesize and take all of the good points that are made by all of the other systems. So these are all of the different positions that we could possibly have. There's a few things that we need to note in order to kind of figure out the answer to this question of which one of these are right. So the first thing we need to note is that at least if I properly formatted the syllogism, which I didn't, that actually, no, either way, it was, even though I still didn't properly format my syllogism, which I'm not going in accordance with my categorical logic poster by having a direct syllogism, which I think it's first. Is it first? Yes, it is first figure. Okay, good. First figure syllogism I'm supposed to give for examples. I'm being a bad logician right now. But what we need to first note is that the subject of the major premise and the subject of the theological conclusion is something which is the same. So this should tell us at least something about this argument. It's because the subject is God in both cases. And since there's only a virtual distinction in God, in this case, at least in this case, we're actually having metaphysical reasoning. But anyways, what's happening here is the subject being God, theology as a science is virtually unfolding. Because when it comes to our intellects are weak. We only go through discursive processes. So the premise of reason, the minor term right there, so that the fact that whatever is immutable is eternal, this minor of reason, due to the weakness of our intellect, ends up becoming an instrument for us. So we have an instrument for us due to the weakness of our intellect to figure out everything about our object. So we're drawing forth everything that's already contained there. So when it comes to this premise of reason, I think a really good analogy is to think about how angelic theology would differ from the theology of men in this case. Because with angels, since they don't have discursion like we do, they look at something, boom, they have it. Where men, we look at something, we have three acts of our intellects, which is kind of like a simple understanding, and then a judgment, and then discursion. Well, then we have drawing forth conclusions and such. Discursive reasoning, technically, drawing forth conclusions about this thing. So an angel would see this premise. This premise. See this premise. God is immutable. Bam. In God is immutable. They would see that God is eternal. That's just true because objectively, they're identical. They're identical. But us men, because of our weakness, we need the minor premise. We need the minor premise as a minor of reason in order to help us as an instrument to figure out that conclusion. Because we don't just see the conclusions in the premises. We need to use instruments to kind of further our understanding of things. So in here already, we can see that the conclusion and the premise, the major premise, conclusion and the major premise are identical. The minor premise isn't adding anything, not adding another object. It's merely adding to our understanding of the same object. Okay, so further, what we need to note is that this major premise of faith is going to help us really with understanding the minor term and understanding the dignity of theology. Because this major premise of faith, God is immutable, because it's something which is revealed. We know it. Those with the habit of faith, at least, know it formally under the light of divine faith. So we have complete certitude on the basis of God revealing. It's something which subjectively is illuminating us. So this connection between these concepts is something which is forged by God himself in us. So when we're taking this minor premise, we're taking, because there's only middle term, sorry. When we're taking this middle term, immutable, we take this middle term and we shift it into the minor premise, taking shifting, and then this middle term, we're attributing something to it. There's only 3 terms in a syllogism. So unless you want to say that we're equivocating, this middle term, or having 4 terms in our syllogism, which would be equivocating, this middle term that gets transferred down to the minor, that is immutable, is the same middle term as in the major. So when we're theologizing, we're really, it's only this second term in the minor that's something of reason. But the entire time, because this fact that the middle is this in the minor is the same as the middle in the major, this entire time we're working with something forged in our intellects by the divine light. So here, theology, while not being entitatively supernatural, it's radically supernatural. There's root in something which is supernatural. So this shows us the dignity of theology, because even in this theologizing, even while we're bringing in minors of reason, the minor of reason in the middle term it shares with the major is still going to be something with this divine status, which is going to help us a lot in understanding what's going on with these theological conclusions. So in this for those who understand, for the Thomists, those who have studied logic in general are going to know that the entire argument rests in the middle term. The middle term is most important, and here the middle term is something which is divinely revealed, not only in the major premise, but also in the minor premise, or else we'd be equivocating on this. Okay, so in order to kind of confirm all of this that we've said to help us understand, let's abstract this right now from this same object that we've been showing, the fact that there's this homogeneity. We're just furthering ourselves in understanding due to our weakness. Let's just confirm it in a more more mathematical way, in a more abstract way. So if we said, sorry, okay, I'm back. So we can turn this, we can turn this mathematical. So we could say where A equals B, that's what we're saying with the is. We're saying by is we mean equals, really. If you didn't know this, big if true. But where A equals B, so this is the major of faith, and B equals C. So B equals C is the inclusive of reason. So it's saying that C is contained in the real object of B. Therefore, A equals C, which is the theological conclusion. So here we can kind of, with this, A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C, we can see how there's this homogeneity going on here. That we're staying within the same object. We're not leaving the object. We're figuring out something new about B, but we're not changing B to some other object. Rather, viewing the same object, B, under a different aspect, C. So A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C. So in here, we have that progress in the same object. but it's a subjective progress. It's a progress in our understanding of it. Because if we were angels, when we saw A equal B, in B we would already see C. Why? Because C is really included in B. So if we were angels, when we heard that God was immutable, we would already know that God is eternal from that, because eternality is included in the concept of immutability. So we're making progress in that same object, but it's a progress which is subjective and not objective. So now, on the other hand, let's look at the physico-connexive virtual, and let's see how really horrific it would be if theology worked by the physico-connective virtual. So it's like a little reminder, I guess, although you probably remember what it is. But the physico-connexive virtual that Suarez supports is going to be one reasoning from the mere essence of something to its properties. So it'd be like reasoning from the fact that something is fire, therefore that fire actually burns. That's the type of reasoning. It has its basis. The properties have its basis on physical laws. So from a simple consideration, we should really see how ridiculous it is. Before we even give another example, we see how ridiculous it is, because due to the fact that God, there's no real distinction between the attributes of God. Therefore, in God, according to divine simplicity, we couldn't have any theological conclusions. Everything would be merely explicative, according to Suarez. No theological conclusions at all. Everything would be dogmatic about God, because there's no real distinction between the attributes. The only real distinction is between the persons. So in this case, no theological conclusions about God at all. So yeah. So the object of theology itself cannot be theologized about. Only the habit of faith, really. So yeah, take that for what you will. But that should be a pretty big indicator from the forefront. But we can consider another one just to show how fickle and really unsubstantial a physico-connexive virtual would be in theology. So if we reasoned like this, Eucharistic accidents are true accidents. True accidents inhere in a substance. Therefore, Eucharistic accidents inhere in a substance. Okay, let's think about this real quick. Eucharistic accidents are true accidents. Very true. True accidents inhere in a substance. Now, what is this? This isn't something which is metaphysico-virtual, well, metaphysico-connexive. Something which is physico-connexive. Because true accidents inhere in a substance isn't a metaphysical judgment. It's not a judgment on the essence or the aptitudinal properties or the transcendental relations of a certain thing. Not at all. Rather, it is a judgment which is about the physical. It's judgment about physical laws. So true accidents inhering in a substance, that's a physical law. It's not anything which is essential to an accident. So from this, we derive something which is really distinct, yet implied by physical laws, from the major premise. So in this case, the conclusion that therefore Eucharistic accidents inhere in a substance is wrong. It's wrong. And this shows the weakness of this type of reasoning, because you don't have certainty. You have a completely different object, so it can't be definable by the church. I mean, unless the church is revealing new objects or coming up with some sort of idea of transforming assistance. So in this case, we wouldn't be able to have really theology at all about our object. Our theological conclusions, properly so called, wouldn't even be certain. Only have a certain physical certainty, and we would need new revelation to even make these theological conclusions useful by making them definable. So we see that in this case, theology would be completely and utterly destroyed if we kept merely the physico-connexive virtual. Okay, that's all. And as always, God bless.